The story of Elijah, one of the most prominent prophets of the Old Testament, is often overlooked in modern discussions about faith and spirituality. Why does this happen? Many might think that the events of the 9th century BC have no relevance today, but in fact, the lessons from Elijah are more essential than ever. In today's world, filled with distractions and challenges, the need for solid faith and courage becomes even more evident. Elijah's story confronts us with a provocative truth. It is in the darkest moments that our faith can grow and strengthen, like steel being forged by fire. Imagine facing a corrupt king, challenging idolatry, and maintaining faith in a hostile environment. Elijah did exactly that, and his journey reveals how we too can confront the challenges that life presents to us. By examining his actions and decisions, we find a model that encourages us to be brave in our own faith, even when everything seems to be against us. More than just a simple narrative of a prophet, Elijah's life is an invitation to introspection and action, showing that we can make a difference amidst adversity. The proposal for the growth of faith intertwines with Elijah's life in surprising ways. As we recount the story of this prophet, we are presented with a scenario where God uses even the most difficult situations to shape and prepare us for what is to come. This idea is liberating because it reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles. Each challenge is an opportunity for growth and learning. Thus, Elijah's story leads us to question: are we willing to accept this journey, even when the path is tortuous? What can we learn from Elijah that can help us face our own monsters in life? Elijah, one of the most illustrious prophets of the Old Testament, emerged during a time when the people of Israel were deeply distanced from God. It was the 9th century BC, an era when idolatry dominated the hearts and minds of the kingdom. The Bible tells us that the kingdom of Israel, under the rule of corrupt kings like Ahab, had succumbed to the worship of false gods, abandoning the sacred commandments. Elijah, however, rose as a solitary voice amid the chaos, determined to restore the purity of faith. He was not just an ordinary prophet, but a fearless man who challenged the powerful without hesitation. In his mission, Elijah directly confronted the kings who had led Israel into disobedience. Ahab, encouraged by his wife Jezebel, promoted the worship of Baal, a pagan deity that became a symbol of the spiritual decadence of the people. Elijah, with the courage of a true prophet, denounced these abuses, putting himself at risk to save the nation. His role as a prophet went beyond simple preaching. He was an agent of change, someone who refused to accept corruption as the norm. In the Bible, we see Elijah acting with fervor, bringing God's word to a people on the brink of spiritual destruction. Elijah's impact was not limited to kings and leaders. He touched the lives of ordinary people, reviving dormant faith in the hearts of the Israelites. Amid widespread idolatry, Elijah brought a message of hope and renewal. He became a symbol of the growth of faith, showing that even in times of spiritual darkness, the light of divine truth can prevail. Elijah's presence in the kingdom of Israel was like a beacon, guiding the people back to the path of righteousness. And this restoration of faith, initiated by Elijah, left a lasting legacy that echoes in the Bible to this day. Elijah was, therefore, more than a prophet. He was a reformer, a spiritual leader who faced unimaginable challenges to fulfill his divine mission. His courage and determination to disobey the orders of kings in the name of God showed that true power lies in faith and obedience to the Creator. In his words and actions, Elijah exemplified what it means to be a faithful servant, willing to sacrifice everything to maintain the sacred covenant between God and his people. Elijah's example continues to inspire believers around the world, showing that true strength comes from God. The Bible stories about Elijah also teach us that even when circumstances seem insurmountable, unshakable faith can move mountains. Elijah lived in a time when idolatry seemed invincible, but he never lost hope. With every challenge he faced, from the wrath of kings to the disillusionment of the people, Elijah demonstrated an unwavering confidence in God. This unshakable faith was what allowed Elijah to fulfill his mission and bring Israel back to the path of righteousness. Elijah teaches us that, regardless of adversity, it is possible to overcome everything when we place our trust in God. Throughout his life, Elijah repeatedly showed that true spiritual transformation begins with the courage to challenge the status quo. He not only denounced idolatry but also called the people to genuine repentance. Elijah knew that the growth of faith was not an easy task, but he was willing to fight for it, even if it meant facing powerful kings and an entire kingdom against him. And this struggle, so well documented in the Bible, not only revitalized faith in Israel but also established Elijah as one of the greatest prophets of the Old Testament, a true spiritual giant in a land full of false gods. Elijah's journey was truly extraordinary, filled with events that challenge human understanding and illustrate divine power in action. Early in his ministry, Elijah announced a devastating drought that would afflict the kingdom of Israel. This announcement was not just a warning but a direct manifestation of God's judgment on the idolatry that dominated the land. The drought not only brought hunger and despair but also showed that the forces of nature were under the control of the God of Israel, not the false gods worshipped by the people. Elijah, faithful to his calling, was the bearer of this harsh but necessary message. During this drought, God's provision for Elijah was another powerful example of supernatural intervention. While the land withered under the relentless heat, Elijah was instructed by God to take refuge by the brook of Cherith, where he would be miraculously fed. Ravens, creatures usually associated with impurity, were used to bring bread and meat to the prophet, sustaining him during a time of total scarcity. This miracle was not only a demonstration of God's power but also a profound lesson in dependence and trust. Elijah learned, and teaches us through his story, that even in the darkest moments, divine providence is sufficient to meet all needs. Elijah's narrative becomes even more impressive with the account of his interaction with a widow in Zarephath. Amidst the famine, Elijah was sent to this woman, who was about to use her last resources to prepare a meal before succumbing to death. However, Elijah, with the authority of a true man of God, asked her to trust and give him something to eat first, promising that her supply of flour and oil would not run out as long as the drought lasted. The widow, in a surprising act of faith, obeyed, and as promised, the provision never failed. This Bible story shows that faith, even when tested to the extreme, can generate miracles that defy logic. Elijah's journey, marked by these miraculous events, reinforces a fundamental truth. When God is in control, the impossible becomes possible. Elijah, sustained by ravens and witnessing the miraculous provision for the widow, experienced events that demonstrate that faith does not depend on circumstances. On the contrary, true faith shines brightest precisely when circumstances are most adverse. Elijah's example encourages us to trust in God, even when everything around us seems hopeless. After all, the Bible stories are not just accounts of past events but guides for living our own lives with confidence in God's power. Elijah also teaches us that obedience to divine will brings with it the provision necessary to fulfill the mission given to us. He did not question God's instructions, even when they seemed unusual, like being fed by ravens or relying on a widow's last resources. This unwavering obedience is what allowed Elijah to perform miracles that would otherwise have been unthinkable. Elijah's story in Zarephath is particularly touching because it illustrates how God can use situations of apparent scarcity to manifest his abundance. Through his life, Elijah challenges us to live with a faith that does not waver, even when conditions seem impossible. Reflecting on Elijah's journey, it becomes clear that each miraculous event was not just a demonstration of power but also an opportunity for the growth of faith, both for Elijah and those around him. The drought, the provision by ravens, and the miracle at the widow's house are concrete examples of how God cares for his servants in all circumstances. These Bible stories, rich in details and meanings, invite us to look beyond present difficulties and trust in God's constant care. Elijah, through his life, teaches us that faith is not mere belief but an active force that transforms even the most desperate situations. Mount Carmel, the setting of one of the most dramatic and memorable confrontations in the Old Testament, was the stage for a true spiritual battle where Elijah firmly stood against the prophets of Baal. On this occasion, the prophet, alone in his mission, challenged 450 prophets of Baal to a test of power that would once and for all determine who the true God of Israel was. This was not just a confrontation between Elijah and the false prophets but a clash between genuine faith and the idolatry that had deeply rooted itself in the hearts of the people. The situation at Mount Carmel was more than a challenge. It was an invitation for the nation of Israel to return to the worship of the true God. The test proposed by Elijah was simple but impressively audacious. Both he and the prophets of Baal would prepare a sacrifice but could not light the fire. The God who answered with fire would be recognized as the true God. 4 hours, the prophets of Baal cried out and cut themselves, desperately seeking an answer that never came. The silence that followed their futile efforts was a powerful testimony to the impotence of their God. Then it was Elijah's turn. He repaired the Lord's altar, arranged the sacrifice, and soaked it with water, making the coming miracle even more impressive. When Elijah prayed, God responded with a consuming fire that left no doubt as to who the true God of Israel was. The fire that fell from heaven not only consumed the sacrifice but also the wood, stones, and water, leaving the people in awe. The spectacle demonstrated beyond any doubt that the Lord was the true God, and the people, overwhelmed by the display of divine power, fell to the ground exclaiming, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" This dramatic moment marked the beginning of a spiritual renewal in Israel, with the prophets of Baal being executed on Elijah's orders. The events at Mount Carmel were not just a victory for Elijah but a victory for the God of Israel, who showed his supremacy over all false gods. Mount Carmel, with its spiritual significance and dramatic events, symbolizes the climax of Elijah's ministry. The confrontation between Elijah and the prophets of Baal was not only a demonstration of divine power but also a pivotal moment of decision for the people of Israel. Faced with irrefutable evidence of God's power, the people were forced to choose who they would serve. Elijah's unwavering faith and determination at this crucial moment demonstrate the kind of courage needed to stand up for the truth, even when surrounded by opposition. His victory on Mount Carmel serves as a powerful reminder that God always prevails, even when it seems that all is lost. Reflecting on the events at Mount Carmel, it becomes clear that Elijah's victory was not just about proving God's power but also about restoring the people's faith. The moment when the fire fell from heaven was a turning point that reignited the faith of a nation that had lost its way. Elijah, through his faith and obedience, facilitated this spiritual renewal, showing that true leadership involves not only confronting evil but also guiding people back to the path of righteousness. The events at Mount Carmel thus serve as a powerful reminder that, with God on our side, even the greatest challenges can be overcome. The descent of fire from heaven at Mount Carmel was more than just a miraculous event. It was a definitive declaration of God's sovereignty over all creation. This moment, so vividly described in the Bible, encapsulates the essence of Elijah's mission, to restore the true worship of God in Israel. Elijah's actions on Mount Carmel remind us that faith is not passive but active, requiring boldness and trust in God's power. The events of that day are a timeless lesson that faith, when put into action, has the power to change the course of history and transform lives. Even after witnessing God's power on Mount Carmel, Elijah faced a moment of intense despair, which led him to flee to the wilderness. Despite his recent victory, the prophet was overwhelmed by fear and exhaustion, feeling isolated and abandoned. The threat from Jezebel, who vowed to take his life in retaliation for the death of Baal's prophets, pushed Elijah to the brink of despair. This moment of weakness reveals the humanity of Elijah, a man who, despite his great faith, was not immune to fear and discouragement. It also reminds us that even the most faithful servants of God can experience moments of doubt and vulnerability. In the wilderness, Elijah prayed to God to take his life, believing that his mission had failed. But instead of condemning Elijah for his despair, God responded with compassion. An angel was sent to provide him with food and water, sustaining him physically and spiritually for the journey ahead. This divine care highlights the depth of God's love and patience, even when his servants falter. Elijah's experience in the wilderness teaches us that God understands our struggles and provides us with the strength and encouragement needed to continue, even when we feel like giving up. Elijah's journey from Mount Carmel to the wilderness and then to Mount Horeb was marked by moments of deep introspection and revelation. At Mount Horeb, God spoke to Elijah not through a powerful wind, earthquake, or fire, but in a gentle whisper. This encounter was a profound lesson for Elijah, reminding him that God's presence is not always manifested in dramatic events but often in the quiet moments of life. This revelation rejuvenated Elijah, helping him understand that his mission was not over and that God still had plans for him. Elijah's time in the wilderness and at Horeb was a period of spiritual renewal, preparing him for the next phase of his ministry. Elijah's experience in the wilderness serves as a powerful reminder that even in our darkest moments, God is with us, providing the strength and guidance we need to continue. The lessons Elijah learned during this time were crucial for his spiritual growth and for the fulfillment of his divine mission. His journey from despair to renewal is a testament to the resilience of faith and the transformative power of God's grace. Elijah's story encourages us to persevere, trusting that God is always working behind the scenes, even when we cannot see it. Reflecting on Elijah's life, we see a man who experienced both extraordinary victories and profound lows. Yet, through it all, he remained a faithful servant of God, committed to fulfilling his mission. Elijah's journey, marked by moments of triumph and despair, teaches us that faith is not a linear path but a journey with ups and downs. What matters most is our willingness to trust God, even when the road is difficult. Elijah's story is a powerful reminder that God's plans for us are greater than we can imagine, and that He will provide everything we need to fulfill our purpose. The prophet Elijah's legacy continued beyond his lifetime, most notably in his role as a forerunner of the Messiah. The Bible tells us that Elijah did not experience death as ordinary men do but was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind, accompanied by a chariot and horses of fire. This dramatic departure was witnessed by his successor, Elisha, who inherited Elijah's prophetic mantle. Elijah's ascension to heaven symbolizes his unique role in God's plan, and his life serves as a bridge between the Old and New Testaments. Elijah is mentioned in the New Testament as one who would come again before the great and dreadful day of the Lord, a prophecy fulfilled in the person of John the Baptist, who came in the spirit and power of Elijah. Elijah's life and ministry have left an indelible mark on the Bible, making him one of the most revered prophets in the history of Israel. His unwavering faith, courage to confront evil, and reliance on God's power serve as an enduring example for believers throughout the ages. Elijah's story challenges us to live with the same boldness and faith, trusting that God is always with us, guiding and empowering us to fulfill our divine mission. As we reflect on Elijah's life, we are reminded that true faith is not about avoiding challenges but about facing them with confidence in God's promises. Elijah's legacy continues to inspire and encourage believers to stand firm in their faith, no matter the circumstances.